Okay guys, I'm going to try to show you a little bit about the actual versus theoretical cost report. So from your dashboard, if you hover over the reports button, uh, you can see some different reports that you can pull. I'm going to hover over inventory, and you've got actual versus theoretical cost, and you've got something also called consolidated actual versus theoretical cost. I'm going to show you just real quick the consolidated before we get over to just the regular actual versus theoretical. Um, so this is one of the first things I look at the end of each week once you guys have posted a Sunday night inventory. So I'm going to make sure that I'm looking at the previous week. So I'm selecting 529 through 6/4. And then on my end, because I have an above store login, I have to set my hierarchy to Chris Andrews. I'm not exactly sure what it looks like on your end, but just make sure that the hierarchy is set to your store or to Chris Andrews, whatever, however it pops up. But I'm going to click retrieve, and then it pulls up all of the stores in the previous week's inventory. So there's a handful of things that I look at right out of the gate. That general managers, you can use this to know kind of how you're doing and how good and how accurate your counts are. So one of the first things I look for is variance. Um, so if you have a negative variance, that means that you have a little bit less product in your store than what the system thinks you should. And in general, we should always have a negative variance. We're always going to have a little bit less product in our store than what the system thinks that we have in there. And that just comes from, maybe there was a couple of tenders that didn't get wasted appropriately, or it's always hard to keep up with every single shredder product, but what we're ultimately looking for is to keep our variance under 3%. And if you're doing a really good job, you'll typically see some stores that are under 2%, and that's a really, really good job of doing some accurate counts if your inventory is under 2%. So you can see like Oak Ridge here with a 5.75. That's a little bit high. So we may either have an inaccurate count, or maybe there's product that we didn't waste correctly. We'll talk in a little bit here about how to track that stuff down. You will notice on Bearden here they have a positive variance. That means that they grew product. So they have more product on their shelves than the system thinks. And if we're doing accurate counts, that should typically not be possible. So like I said, this is kind of what I look at, and we're going to jump into Bearden's here in a little bit, so we can kind of see exactly what happened with theirs. But so another thing that I look at as well is variance value. So it's very similar to variance percentage, but it's just going to give you a dollar value. So I mean, putting the dollars and cents behind it, a 5.75% variance at Oak Ridge means that there's almost $2,000 worth of product that's unaccounted for or miscounted. Over at Bearden with an 11.7% growth variance, there's $3,500 in product that we don't actually have there. There's probably a miscount, or it's saying we grew $3,500 worth of product. So that's where I look at when I'm thinking about variance, just from an overall perspective. How do we do for the full week? The next thing I like to look at is my theoretical percentage. And typically you're going to see a good theoretical percentage is running anywhere between about 30% and 34%. If you think about it this way, if you've got a 33% theoretical, that's just telling you what the system thinks you ran. So what you ran through the micro system, that's what it thinks you sold. And that would be, in a perfect world, we didn't waste anything, we got exactly perfect yields out of every case of food we had. That's the best cost of goods that you could have run based off of your sales from the previous week. So that's typically going to be between 30 and 33%. So just think about it this way: if you're running 33% theoretical and you've got a 2% variance, then your actual cost of goods in this column would be 35. So 33% theoretical, 2% variance, your actual cost of goods will be 35%. So I'll look there to try to between the theoretical and then adding in your variance to see what you actually ran. And when we're really doing things correctly, we've got the right numbers input, then your your actual cost of goods over here should translate to your actual P&L. So that's just kind of a above store view that I like to look at to just give me an idea of, all right, who's doing a good job, who's getting really accurate counts, who's following up on their variances. So I can also look into, if I go hover over reports, click on it, hover over inventory, I can dive into what's going on at a specific store with this actual theoretical cost. And you can see I'm on Bearden store still. So I'm going to inventory, I'm going to actual theoretical cost. I'm making sure that my date range is set to the correct week that I'm trying to look at, and I'm going to click retrieve. So this is going to show you each category the same way it looks on your P&L. So they call them general ledger codes, but this above section is mainly customer controlled items and oil. And then down here, your food and beverages. This is stuff that's actually getting pulled out of your system through crunch time and through micros. These are items that we have recipes for. So we're pulling out, if it's chicken finger plate, it's pulling out a plate. It's pulling out 5 tenders. It's pulling out the breader that goes on that tender. It's pulling out your Zax sauce. So like I said, it's pulling out a recipe that you're selling through your system. So what you're going to see here is kind of what the actual cost of those items based on what we set our inventory from the previous week and what our inventory was this past Sunday, and then theoretical. And again, theoretical is this is what the system thinks that we should have sold. So and then you're going to see a variance value over here. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is customer controlled items and oil, those can't be pulled out of the system, so there will never be a variance value there. But that doesn't mean that that we're not necessarily inaccurate with our counts, because if you look at it here, with our oil and shortening, it said we used our actual cost. This is how much it cost us to use oil and shortening last week at the Bearden store. Our actual cost was about $350 on oil and shortening. Our actual cost on customer controlled food, so you're talking about like ketchup packets, sugar packets, things like that, was negative $206. So I don't think somebody came and paid us $206 for customer controlled food. So I can look at it and say, hey, maybe we've got a miscount there. So I can come into customer controlled food, I can click on that item, and it's going to show me here actually what happened. And so what I see here off the bat is I've got negative numbers. There's no way that I could ever possibly have negative numbers in our actual usage. So that means that from that inventory back on 5/28, that final inventory that we did on 5/28 to the final inventory we did on 6/4, we counted something incorrectly, because we're saying that we grew mayonnaise packets. So when I spot that, I know that there was something incorrect on my final for post inventory, or there was an incorrect quantity on a previous inventory as well. And you can click on that number and dive deeper down into it and see some information. Now on customer controlled items, it doesn't give you a whole lot of stuff because it's just taking, it can't pull those numbers out of the system. So it's just taking actually what you tell it. So we'll come back to this item and look on your actual inventory count to look at mayonnaise packets here in a little bit. So going back, again, remember we noticed a negative number on customer controlled food. There's no way we actually grew those items, so we know that we're coming back to that. Let's move down to food and beverages, which is these are items that can actually get pulled out of our system. So these give us an opportunity to actually look at some variances. So you can see that we had about $388 less in inventory than the system thought we should. So the system says it thinks we only spent $833 on general food items. When we did the inventories, we told it we spent $2,200 on food items. So here's where I can say, all right, well, I want to see what makes up that $388, see if there's one particular item that maybe I counted incorrectly. So I can click on Food General, and again, I can sort by variance value. and it's going to kick the biggest variance values all the way up to the top. So theoretically, we used about $120 worth of bacon last week at Bearden. We told the system when we did counts that we used about $185 worth of bacon. So when I see that, I'm going to say, all right, well, did we count bacon correctly? That should always be my first question. Did we count this item correctly? And I can dive into that and say, you know, all right, well, maybe we missed, maybe we didn't count everything that we had just moved a full case up into the chef space cooler and we didn't count that, because that would make it where if I didn't count an item, then we're telling the system that we've already used it. So maybe we have gone through too much of that. So and you can see here on this page, once you dive further down into the bacon, you can see where we added. You can see a PFG broadline, like this is a purchase. You can see the two different truck orders that we had that week. And then you can see each day the sales depletion. So it's saying that we used $11 worth of bacon here, $16 worth of bacon here, $23 worth of bacon here. So that doesn't, it's not showing you, it's showing you what you should have used. And you can always track it back to look at your counts and see if your counts don't match up to the information that it's giving you. So that's one way that you can just sort by variance and look for particular items that you can say, hey, either that count doesn't look right, or hey, maybe we're wasting a bunch of bacon and I don't know it. So you can start watching that in your day-to-day practices and say, hey, are we throwing away a bunch of bacon at the end of the night that we're not wasting? Or are we putting 4 slices on a club sandwich instead of 2 slices? This information will help you keep a target on items that you're really going to try to control in the store. So going back to this page that shows all of the items. Remember we had with the Bearden store, I showed you in the previous video that we had an issue with tenders. If we're sorting by value variance, I've got it where it's kicking up stuff that we grew. So if it's a positive number, that's saying that we grew that item. If it's a negative number, it's saying we are missing that item. All right. So with tenders, remember we had that issue where we were growing chicken tenders, and this gives me another, just like that review process that I showed you guys earlier. This is telling me I've got $2,000 more in inventory than the system thinks we have. Also, if you look at this actual number, it's saying based on the inventory that we put in, we actually only used $540 worth of chicken tenders, and our average case cost is about $85 per case. So if that is accurate, if our counts were all accurate, that would be saying that we only used 6.4 cases of chicken tenders, which we know not to be correct. So you can look at that and say, all right, I know that count is not correct. So I can click on tenders, and it gives me a lot of really detailed information on, well, actually that just looks exactly the same. Let me try to click on value again and see if it gets, yeah. So this gives a deeper dive to show where you had truck orders coming in. So we bought $1,500 worth of tenders on that truck. We bought $1,700 worth of tenders on that truck. And then it shows me sales each day. So we sold about $300 worth of chicken there. We sold about $330 worth of tenders there. That shows me each day's sales, which you see there's 7 entries in there, which makes sense. It's showing you inventory variances over here. So this helps me track down some things down to critical counts as well. So if you can see on 529, all of a sudden there was an inventory variance of minus $565 worth of chicken. That tells me that day's count had to be incorrect. There's no way we lost $565 worth of chicken unless somebody was taking some cases out the back. So that tells me that maybe I need to look at, hey, on Monday's critical counts, I need to make sure that we're counting accurately. And you can see here $274, that's saying we grew 3 or 4 cases worth of chicken. So this report can help you track down some individual variances based on your critical counts. And then you see on the 6.4 inventory, this big variance. This is where, if you refer back to that previous video, we accidentally did not delete out the eaches that auto-populated on our inventory count when we hit by exception, and it's saying that we essentially grew $2,000 worth of chicken. So again, just to recap, this actual versus theoretical report, you won't need to use it all the time if you're using that review inventory page correctly. But it is another place where you can go in and you can kind of look at your overall perspective of, hey, what will my P&L look like? And what am I spending in each category? And so that I can really kind of dive in and focus on an individual item, or dive in and say, hey, I've got a big variance in value in this particular area.